Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tim, so very much. So very kind. Well, hello, Villanova. Oh, come. You can do better than that. It's someone's birthday today. Let's try that again. Hello, Villanova. Come on. That's better. Okay. Well, I must say it's a tremendous honor for me to be here. Today is, of course, St. Augustine's birthday, and I'm very excited, too, because you're one of the few universities that happen to have a pretty unique base of commitment to sustainability. You've made the connection between daily actions and responsibility to our planet and to social justice. So you're accomplishing some great things. And let's see, you've signed on to the St. Francis Pledge, and you have a well-stated commitment page in place on your website, and you have an absolutely phenomenal dining services team, truly. So you're very fortunate here. You're also members of the AASHE, if anybody knows what that is, Sustainability in Higher Education, and you've developed your first ever annual sustainability report earlier this year. All pretty impressive, but so let's take a closer look at the word that all of this is based on. The most important word, I think, that we all need to define quite accurately. It's this word, sustainable. Because if we don't define this word accurately, well, then just how far will a commitment go? I mean, some find some humor in that, but it's a pretty dire comic, isn't it? Huh. Okay, so I began looking at food choices and agricultural systems quite some time ago. And at that time, I became a bit more aware, so I stopped eating processed foods, started looking for more organically grown products, and I also stopped eating animals, and that was nearly 40 years ago. That's a 4 with a 0 after it. There's no need to do the math on it, but it was when I was in graduate school, primarily from a health and environment standpoint, and also because of the animal research I was involved with at that time, which I still do, but now it's more of this type of animal research, perhaps in a jungle or remote area, getting a better grasp on what sustainability in fact really means. So that would have to include researching animals like these at some of the largest and smallest dairy operations in the world, and these grass-fed or pastured livestock operations here and in the US and in many countries overseas. This happens to be in the UK. That guy really likes me. I'm not talking about the one over there. I'm talking about in the foreground. And I've researched quite a few farms like these. And we can't leave fish out of the equation now, can we? So we're going to examine the word sustainable pretty carefully because recently it's been misused. And recently it's been morphed into so many different meanings to suit so many different needs. And it's the latest buzz. I mean, you see this word everywhere. Now, for most people, it refers to our energy sector. How many gallons of gas your car can achieve per mile, how many miles it can achieve per gallon, I should say. And it also refers to waste, how what and when to recycle, often to composting. And often we think of economic or social sustainability, but rarely is food choice connected to sustainability efforts, if ever, especially the raising and eating of animals despite the enormous effect. It's simply too challenging for everyone, culturally, socially. Now, we humans have reached a critical and fragile point in our evolutionary journey as a species. I mean, just in the past 100 years, a blink of an eye, really, we've reached the Anthropocene era, where we've acquired the power to positively, but mostly negatively, affect our biosphere, the litho and hydro and atmosphere, the very environs that sustain us and all other life on Earth. Unfortunately, we haven't acquired the wisdom or the maturity to be able to manage this power in a sensible or beneficial manner. We're essentially in the adolescent phase, I think, of our place in the big history. And we've reached a bottleneck of sorts, one that many experts predict that we may not be able to work our way through as a species. Now, how does your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, for instance, other than what you ate tonight, prepared so well by the dining services group, but how does your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, for instance, what you choose to eat today or any other day, have anything at all to do with a shaman from the Amazon area or one of the 2 billion people in the world without water? Or the imminent extinction of a number of species on Earth? Or the plight of this starving child in Ethiopia? Or even the taxes that I have to pay or or should pay to our government this year. What possibly could you and the food you choose to eat have anything to do with these things, and then why should you care? Well, I call all this global depletion, the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health. It's still sustainability. I just think we need to hear it from a different direction, and we need to hear the whole story through an unfiltered lens. So how many are familiar with Jamie Oliver, or Mark Bittman, or, of course, Michael Pollan? Yeah, about the industrialization of food, processed food, high fructose corn syrup, eating less meat, important? Yeah, sure. But these are just fragments of the picture. We need to move beyond all that and understand the entire picture, the sustainability of our planet, our resources, and ourselves. And to do this, we need to always include topics such as loss of biodiversity, world hunger, sustainability of our own health, water scarcity, agricultural land use inefficiencies, the state of our oceans and fish, and climate change. These are all connected by food choice. Well, the story for me begins with these two numbers. There are 7.2 billion people living on our planet today, 240,000 added every single day. So control of the growth of our population is an issue, but it's not nearly so much of a problem as the number on the right, what we're doing to the planet. The number on the right represents the fact that there are more than 70 billion animals living on our planet that we raise and eat for food each year, and it repeats itself year after year in growing numbers, and that's the problem. In fact, this 70 billion number is quite impossible to pin down, and it's very much on the light side, because on any given day you may find up to 1.7 trillion chickens in the world, or 1 to 2 trillion fish in the world on their way sooner or later added that year going off to slaughter. Let's look at a graphic about global depletion. Certainly there are other industries that contribute to this picture, but none have the comprehensive impact. Now, just how serious is this depletion? Very. In some cases it's irreversible and it's spiraling downward quickly. All of these systems that you see are affected. Simply put, we're in overshoot mode, demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. It would take 1.5 to 2 full Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet, and most of this is due to our choice to eat animals. It's serious enough on its own merit, but it's made much more so because of all the layers and layers of various influences that tend to bury the problem and bury its solutions. We just don't want to deal with it. What's critical for everyone to understand that this is not just a factory farm issue. Not at all. It's a raising animals to eat issue, and we're going to see that as we go along tonight. Well, let's refine our thoughts on global warming or climate change. First, we need to remember that global warming is just one component of the much larger, more profound problem of global depletion, the more total effect we have on our planet. Discussions regarding global warming and climate change have now taken front stage nearly everywhere. It must be remembered, though, that climate change will have the effects of exacerbation, taking events and making matters worse. Global warming and climate change, for instance, will not be the initial cause of these categories of global depletion. We cause these things. Climate change will worsen them. Well, this widely cited study was shocking when it first appeared. I mean, how could the meat everyone's eating cause more greenhouse gas emissions than all the cars, trucks, planes, and trains that we drive and fly every day? It was hardly believable, the entire transportation sector. But instead of 18%, as that original 2006 United Nations report stated, or even 14.5%, as they stated about a year ago in October, a couple of researchers, independent of each other, and some together, found that livestock could produce, I mean, it's possible, according to them, they could produce as much as 51% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there are a number of reasons for the difference between these numbers, the lower ones and the higher one, but most important to me is the use of inaccurate global warming potential for methane. It's vastly understated by the United Nations report, and possible bias amongst the authors of those reports, who are all consultants for the livestock industry. Well, these figures are also without factoring in all the greenhouse gases emitted because of our demand to eat fish. Never factored in fuel, refrigeration, packaging, processing, transportation, et cetera. And regardless of where the exact number resides, somewhere between 14.5% and 51%, it's cause for alarm and it's cause for immediate action. Now, a perfect example of how this information is suppressed occurs every single year during our climate change conferences, held originally in Kyoto with its 1997 Kyoto Protocol. Most recently it was in November in Warsaw. Next month it'll be in Peru, where countries have come together and they're trying to solve this global warming problem, but none of this is being addressed. In fact, it's now being postponed. And nothing was really accomplished at Warsaw or really previous summits, primarily because the two largest emitters in the world, China and the US, well, they don't participate. And the 200 countries in attendance, well, they can't agree on anything. So now the attention's turning to how we can all adapt to climate change, since it appears to be inevitable to them, rather than putting forth the effort to mitigate it. Speaking of the US and China, we'll see how this new agreement announced yesterday or the day before will play out. It's certainly great news to me and should be for you, but I have many concerns about actual implementation and timing. Well, every aspect of global depletion has a timeline. It's not really a question of if we're going to run out of something, it's when. The most critical timeline of all, I think, is that of climate change. We only have a three-year window of time from now to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or we're going to see irreversible warming of our planet with catastrophic effects. Now, most of you know this. In fact, the International Energy Agency has been quite clear about this window of opportunity for us to limit global warming, and that window closes at the end of year 2017. But what does that have to do with food? It's not really mentioned anywhere in your president's climate commitment or elsewhere. Well, that's a good question, because we all believe that climate change is caused by the energy sector, electricity, burning fossil fuels, especially coal. And that belief begins with Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it carries right on through articles such as these, where we blame Shell Oil and BP and Exxon for climate change. Well, they do have something to do with it, but whether it's with winning a Nobel Peace Prize or at an annual global climate change conference or with prominent publications, those with a platform have failed to mention or properly position the role of eating animals despite its incredible contribution of 15 to 50% of the problem. To summarize the connection between food choice and climate change, we have this. Climate change is very real, it's worsening, and the situation's urgent. Greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, anthropogenic, significantly affect climate change. Raising animals for us to eat is one of the largest contributors, single sector contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And lastly, any food movement away from factory farms, but including grass-fed or pastured animal systems, will not solve the problem. In fact, it's going to make matters worse. More land use changes, more deforestation, more production of methane. 40 to 60% more methane is produced per one grass-fed cow as compared to grain-fed. So given the predictions of nearly every climate scientist in the world, our business-as-usual approach to climate change isn't going to work. It hasn't worked thus far. Therefore, it's time to get outside the box in many ways and take the right action, and to do it now. So what do I mean in this instance by the right action? Looking at solutions, prescriptions, this is what we have. The first approach is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, just like Al Gore and everyone else recommends. But it's a good idea, but renewable energy infrastructures such as building solar and wind generators all over our country to reduce climate change, it's a great idea, but it's projected to take at least 20 more years and $20 trillion, about $1 trillion a year to develop. Well, we don't have 20 years, and we really don't have $20 trillion. So another solution, partial solution to climate change would be we could stop eating animals today. I mean, it doesn't have to take 20 years. And instead of $20 trillion, it costs nothing. So that's a prescription to help mitigate, not adapt to, but to help mitigate climate change. Interspersed throughout our discussions, you're going to hear and see a few themes tonight. One theme is how information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged. So much so that objectives of many important meetings, like the climate change conferences and other organizations, well, those objectives aren't being met. And that all begins with the words we use. How clear are they? Are they conveying reality? These are all food movements that superficially seem to make sense. Well, because they make you feel as if you're going in the right direction. Because they're going away from factory farms. They're going away from processed foods. So that's got to be a good thing, right? Maybe, maybe not. Do any of these words to you mean sustainable or healthy? Many would want you to think so. How about the word humane? Does humane equal sustainable? And if it does, which it doesn't, who is it that tries to define humane for all of us? Incredibly, in the food system, there's one person that the USDA and every humane certified organization relies on for that definition of humane. One person, not a committee, one person. Does humane even equal humane? Well, this statement was taken from the food service section of the sustainability policy at UC Berkeley. Their definition of humane raised, as you can see, is sustainable, one and the same. Imagine that. And also take a closer look at their logo across the top. It's pretty telling that their one snapshot depiction of sustainability, as with most campuses, is with energy and greenhouse gas emissions. It's a little bit over-focused, but that being the case, we now know that 15% or more of those wind generators should be replaced by the words no livestock. Shouldn't they? That'd be a bit more accurate for UC Berkeley, wouldn't it? And what does real food mean? Well, I have issues with its precepts. Real food is a very large movement today. It's getting larger and larger on college campuses, and it's defined by being local, fair, sustainable, and humane, all four of those things. Well, that sounds terrific. So I brought two types of food items with me that I thought I'd show you. One's considered not real food. It's not real food. It's this Vega bar I grabbed. It's not real food because it's not local. It's made in Vancouver, way over there, way up there and over there. And worse, it's processed. It's all put together for you. But, I mean, it does have sachi-inchi seeds in it. It does have 4 different types of organic plant protein. It's really put together quite beautifully well. But remember, it's not real food. It's not real food because it doesn't fit their definition. Whereas this other food item I brought is considered real food. And actually, I couldn't get myself around to bringing the other food item. It's this. Yeah, 18,000 chickens are killed every minute. Every 60 seconds in our country, 18,000. So I suppose that's pretty real. And if chicken, beef, or pork, or any animal products considered real food, what about these? Real food too? Oh, sure. Why not? They come along with it. And they're free. Not so bad, huh? Good deal. So unlike the Vega bar, this poor thing's considered real food because it's local, and the real food people think that it's sustainable, healthy, and humane, but it's not. It's none of those things other than being local. Therefore, the real food movement is flawed because the definitions they're using are flawed, similar to every other food movement on this list. Just because something's local doesn't at all mean that it's healthy or sustainable or humane. It doesn't even mean that it should be eaten. The only thing that local means is that it's not very far from here. And we're going to come back to that and help redefine it and bring it back together in a moment. Again, it all begins with the words we use. Are they conveying reality? Well, let's see. Let's look at the word food, for instance. My definition of the word food is that which is consumed to ultimately support life. Well, this represents a food term that we'll talk about a little bit, but initially it's constantly used improperly. I hear this every day. I mean, what is this? Anybody know what it is? It's a protein. Perhaps a rudimentary protein. It doesn't have the secondary and tertiary molecular characteristics. But when you're thinking about eating protein, this is what you should be thinking about. As in, I need to get my protein today. That's it. That was in the dining room today, wasn't it? That's something to that effect. Protein's not the little buddy looking over my shoulder. That's my research assistant. It seems pretty obvious, isn't it? And what about, he doesn't like what I'm writing about so much, but what about this group therapy session? Huh? None of these guys want to be called protein. Pretty sure of that. It's most likely why they're in group therapy. They've been called protein one too many times, especially turkey here. Protein's also not the guy on the left here, and yet that's what people are calling protein, aren't they? The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva that he always has. He's a cow. I mean, he shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right, and yet we do. I mean, the guy on the right probably wants to be called protein. I don't know. In fact, his name is Plato. Pretty special. One of the most pressing concerns we have today regarding sustaining our life and future life on Earth is our supply of fresh water. From 1941 to 2011, the world's population tripled, but freshwater consumption quadrupled. There's a growing gap between worldwide demand for water and what's really available. With so much demand, there's expected to be a 40% shortage in water supply in just 15 years. Now, what you decide to eat has every single thing to do with this. Scientists are very concerned about freshwater scarcity, but I think it's more a matter of water management, isn't it? Yeah, instead of focusing on technologies, we should be first looking at choices. Is this a good choice? How about this? Is this a good choice? Are any of these good choices? These are all global averages. They can vary slightly down, definitely up, as compared to, say, these choices, still from the Water Footprint Network. It's quite a difference, wouldn't you say? Sure. Although water on Earth remains constant, the consumptive form it happens to be in does not. 4 out of 5 people now live within 30 miles of a water-damaged area, meaning soon to run out or polluted. There are nearly 300 transboundary river and waterways on Earth where multiple countries share a vital running water supply. As we see water shortages over the next 15 years, we will surely see droughts, famine, human sickness, and then we're going to see conflicts, social unrest, and even wars. Indeed, those living downstream will be fiercely battling those living upstream for their water rights. Climate change will make these matters worse, but not cause them. Food choice and virtual water trading through food, especially with water-intensive products like animal products, will play a much larger role than energy or fossil fuel use. In many areas of the world, freshwater scarcity coexists with hunger and poverty. It's a vicious cycle. Afghanistan, Sudan, Saudi Arabia are raising livestock and crops to feed them while running their water supplies dry. 60% of Ethiopia's population suffers from hunger and thirst, and yet their dehydrated land is being used to support a growing herd of over 50 million cattle, the largest in Africa. Syria is in desperately need of a number of things, but they're also desperately in need of freshwater supplies for their thirsty 18 million humans. But at the same time, they're attempting to provide water for 47 million cattle, sheep, and goats. And so it is with Pakistan, Mongolia, Russia, India, and nearly every country in the world, struggling with an increasing human population, dwindling resources, and being strangled by their meat and dairy culture. And this has to include the country of California. They think they're their own country, I think, but and Arizona, and most of the Southwest United States. Regarding freshwater, things aren't going so well in California, but have they given thought to where most of the water supply is going? It's not going to golf courses, and it's not going to lawn care. And I can say this in an endearing way because I lecture out there frequently. I just laugh there. Between 60 and 70% of the total consumptive water usage, especially from the Colorado River, goes to livestock and crops to feed them. California uses 900,000 acres of land just to produce alfalfa. Anybody here from California? Oh, great. Well, why do you do that? why do you do that? Because each one of those 900,000 acres of alfalfa, each one, requires 1 to 2 million gallons of water each year to irrigate, and they all get irrigated, every acre. And guess where all that alfalfa goes? It goes to livestock. 5% to horses, the rest to livestock. Using less water to brush our teeth, flush toilets, do laundry, or less time in the shower will save on average 2 to 3 gallons of water per day per act. Now that's important. However, eliminating meat or dairy and dairy from one's diet will save over 1,000 gallons of water per person every day. The average household in our country uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year, according to the EPA. Indoor use, about the same outdoors. It's quite a bit of water, and it's what we're focused on in times of drought, how to reduce this. Well, the average person in our country consumes just under 200 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 46 pounds of pig and 58 pounds of cow, 102 pounds of chicken and turkey, in addition to the 248 eggs, and 616 pounds of dairy products, which equates to 405,000 gallons of water per person per year just to support that animal product diet. So now a more accurate view is that the EPA should use and disseminate is that every household of 3 people in the US, well, they use over 1 million gallons of water each year, not 50,000. 1.2 million gallons, and 96% of that outrageous water use is from their choice to eat animals. So whenever there's a drought or water shortage anywhere in our country, does our government or your community step up and declare a state of rationing or eliminating meat or dairy? Well, why not? Why shouldn't they? So then these are the timelines for fresh water. And it's not anything that we can feel comfortable with. And what about this phrase? 15 million people heard Ted Danson proclaim his love of fish on Earth Day last year and every other day since 1987, and yet he eats them for all those years. Now, no offense, please, to Mr. Danson, and maybe things have changed recently, but for him and 98% of all other individuals in the world, this phrase, I love fish, actually means this: I love to eat fish, doesn't it? Yeah, that's what we really mean. If we love fish, as in loving your cat or your dog, you certainly wouldn't kill and eat them, would you? No, I don't think so. Again, it's how we use our words, isn't it? In fact, Oceana's Objectives, one of the most influential conservation organizations in the world, their objectives were made very clear last year in an interview where their spokesperson stated, it's not about saving the fish, it's about saving the fishermen. And that explains a bit about the disconnect. Well, there are three principal ways our oceans are being destroyed, and all three are caused, or at least heavily affected, by our food choice. Raising and eating animals on land causes warming and acidification of our oceans. Surface runoff from livestock operations on land have caused more than 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world, comprising 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of life. So any meaningful discussion of the state of our oceans has to first begin with frank discussions about land-based animal agriculture. But it is fishing that has the largest impact of all. Incredibly large amounts of sea life are taken from our oceans in three ways. First, they're taken as target fish. You know, that's the one you want to eat. Fish are also taken out of our oceans to feed other fish, grown on factory fish farms, part of the aquaculture movement. And lastly, fish are also taken as by-kill due to the first two types of fishing. Well, that really doesn't leave too much in our oceans now, does it? In fact, our oceans are being ravaged, and yet everyone we know still eats fish. Fragile, interdependent, and poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. Over 90 million tons of fish were caught last year, with quite a few more hundreds of millions of tons of by-kill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught, killed, and discarded in the process of trying to catch that targeted fish everyone's asking for. By-kill includes juvenile fish that will never make their way to maturity, all 7 of the endangered sea turtles, sea lions, birds, dolphins, even whales are by-kill. Of the 17 major fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either overexploited or on the verge of collapse. 85% of the world's fish species are affected, considered heavily depleted from overfishing practices. Well, that's quite a bit of damage. But along comes this word, sustainable, to justify continued harvesting. Yeah, we can just stamp that word on anything, really, and then continue in the take mode, and we can feel good about it. Why? Well, because it's sustainable. That's why. I mean, how can that word even be used in the fishing industry? Who defines it? These are critical questions we should all be asking. Who defines that word sustainable? Who monitors it? Because with less than 1% of all of our oceans being regulated, that's right, less than 1% of all of our oceans are regulated, so who decides on enforcement? So if you look at this carefully, the real answer is no one, and I say real answer because there's now sea life caught and labeled sustainable, when in fact it's not. But it's still labeled as such by a number of highly respected organizations, such as the Marine Stewardship Council, or MSC. They've made quite a bit of money off of this. And there are many, many examples: tuna, cod, pollock, haddock, salmon, krill, menhaden, hake. I mean, there's so many. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, highly respected organization, has lobster from the Gulf of Maine, both U.S. and Canada waters, listed as a good alternative. They've had it listed as a good alternative for years now. I keep looking and hoping they take it off, but it's not. It never has been a good alternative for many reasons. Rapidly declining number of lobster, inefficient trapping mechanisms, and most importantly is the very sad effect, as most fishing does, the sad effect it has on other species that lobster trapping has on the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. There are only 400 of these truly magnificent creatures left that we haven't killed. 400. And nearly all of them, 80% of them, are getting entangled, injured, and killed in those trap lines. We owe these whales and lobsters much more than this. Elsewhere in the world, there have been an estimated 500 miles of non-biodegradable fishing nets cut loose from fishing vessels each year 500 miles each year for the past 25 years, catching countless numbers of unsuspecting sea life. And you know, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is aptly named because that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching all this happen while promoting it to be continued with trawling, purse seine, longline fishing methods. Each year, more than 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises are killed in fishing gear. And so it is with fishing under the sustainable label. Target fish are becoming extinct. We move on to the next fish in line, creating serial depletion, and then other sea life up and down the food web are becoming extinct, all part of the collateral damage that begins with us. Well, coral reef systems around the world are in serious trouble. The Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral cover since 1985. Now, most would think it's due to pollution and climate change, but the primary cause of coral reef death throughout the entire Caribbean region anyway is not pollution. It's not from climate change. It's from overfishing. An example in the other direction can be found in the Queens Islands off the southern coast of Cuba, where they haven't allowed any commercial fishing. Their coral reef ecosystems today look the same as they have for the past thousands of years. One of the most important factors in balancing coral reef systems are predatory fish, apex feeders like sharks, but we're killing them too, quite a few of them. 1/3 of all shark species are nearing extinction. We're killing nearly 100 million sharks per year. Why? Well, 40 million sharks had their fins cut off like this, and then they're thrown overboard to die so we can eat shark fin soup. And it's terrible to see this, isn't it? And I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourselves, I don't eat shark fin soup. Not here at Villanova. No, not me. And furthermore, it's banned in 8 states in our country and counting. Well, isn't that great? But again, 98% of us do eat fish. And by eating fish, any type of fish, we're doing this to 60 million sharks that are caught each year and killed in fishing nets and lines as bykill. So go ahead and ban shark fin soup all you want, but why would you stop there? If you're truly concerned about sharks, you should ban fishing. Well, killing krill has now become a very large business. But you don't need to eat krill to get your omega-3s, unless you listen to Dr. Oz, I guess. However, krill is fundamental to the survival of almost every animal species in and around the Antarctic, and krill numbers have dropped by 78% since 1980. A large pod of pilot whales, 22 of them, beached themselves in the Florida Keys a few months back. The cause of death was likely malnutrition, since they found they had no food in their stomachs. These whales eat mackerel, herring, and lots of squid, all of which we've fished to an overexploited state. There's hardly any left. This is a perfect example of the cascading effect that we have on other sea life as we continue to eat sea animals, taking away the food supply from other species that actually do need to eat squid. Well, here's the point regarding our oceans. It's no longer a problem of overfishing. That was a term that could be used fairly accurately back in the mid-1800s. Today, it's about fishing. Well, not to worry, we now have fish farms. 49% and increasing each year of all fish consumed worldwide are produced from aquaculture, which is growing faster than any other food sector. One reason for this tremendous growth is a very false illusion of environmentalism. Here we have another interesting idea where fish are caught in our already ravaged oceans to feed other fish, produced on factory fish farms, sometimes at a ratio of 20-1, in the form of fish, fish meal, fish oil. Very soon we're going to run out of fish in our oceans and run out of land to raise livestock. So we're going to be turning to this, a more closed-loop system of aquaculture called aquaponics, a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics that grows both fish and plants. Businesses are already snatching up abandoned industrial warehouses in many urban settings, subsidized in many ways. This happens to be in Chicago, one of them that I visited. They're raising fish in tanks, growing vegetables on top with the wastewater, and then cycling it back to fish. But every one of them uses massive amounts of electricity and massive amounts of feed inputs. And these are all essentially adulterated forms of plant-based hydroponics or aeroponics. Now, regardless of where the fish on your plate or someone else's plate comes from, now or in the future, is the process of catching and slaughtering fish. Is that process humane? And if it isn't, then why do we do it? Does anyone know what nociceptors are? Especially polymodal nociceptors. They're sensory receptors associated with feeling pain. You have them. Most mammals have numerous polymodal nociceptors in and around their face, their head, their neck. So do fish. So in reality, there's no such thing as sustainable commercial fishing. With continued warming, acidification, and deoxygenation, our oceans that we once felt were so robust will very soon be unable to support what few life forms remain in and around them. So then the timelines for our oceans look like this. And this is not science fiction. It's not something I just made up on the way over here. It's reality. And quite sadly, this has all happened on our watch of the last 50 to 100 years. And you're looking at what we've created and we're passing on and perpetuating for future generations. While palm oil has front page status, tropical rainforest loss due to livestock is occurring at a 4 times greater rate than due to palm oil. In the last 25 years, 25 to 50 times more rainforest has been lost due to raising livestock than what's been lost due to palm oil. So be concerned about palm oil. It's important. But be 25 to 50 times more concerned about livestock and animal agriculture. An area of tropical rainforest the size of a football field is destroyed every second, which is tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like because the world's food priorities are with eating livestock or using palm oil, not with being stewards of other living things as we should be. This is the sad result, the burning and bulldozing of rainforests. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the US or anywhere else, you're supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. Between 70 and 80% of all rainforest loss in the Amazon area is due to raising livestock, with another 10% lost to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. And remember, these livestock are grazing in this area. It's not a matter of factory farming. By the year 2050, most rainforests will be gone, and the few patches that remain will have already been way past their tipping points. So this, of course, means that the millions of species that originally lived in these rainforests will be gone, the once abundant water systems destroyed, and of course their oxygenation and climate regulatory mechanisms will be lost for the next few millions of years, which is how long it took these rainforests to develop. And we've wiped them out in less than 50 years. Well, this is how much land is being used to raise livestock. 45% of the entire land mass on Earth, 70% of all arable land. So how accurate is this ridiculous figure? Well, it's documented by the International Livestock Research Institute. So most likely this 45% figure was underestimated. If we factor in public lands for grazing, livestock account for 97% of all land used for agriculture in our country. The reason animal agriculture creates so many sustainability problems is quite simple. Probably sum up this entire discussion in one sentence. It's terribly inefficient. It wastes resources, energy, and lives. It's the most inefficient manner in which we can produce food. You can produce 15 times more protein from plants as you can from animals on any given area of land. You can produce anywhere from 2,500 to 60,000 pounds of plant foods on 1 acre of land versus 50 to 480 pounds of meat or animal products on that same acre. In the US, raising animals for us to eat creates more pollution, according to the EPA, of our waterways than all other industries combined. And look at this statistic. Livestock produce 100 times more waste than the entire human population of our country. Globally, there are nearly 1 billion people suffering from hunger. This year alone, over 3 million children will die from starvation. Even with increased climate change, we're producing enough grain globally to feed 2 times as many people as there are on Earth. Last year, there was considered a record harvest grain in the world, with over 3 billion tons produced, but nearly half of that was given to animals in the meat and dairy industry. Each year, 77% of all coarse grain, oats, sorghum, rye, millet, oats, 77% produced in the world is consumed by livestock. So we can't blame climate change, droughts, or flooding for the world's food security issues. Clearly, the difficulty is not how or if we can produce enough food to feed the hungry or the growing global population, but rather where all the food we produce globally is going. So solving world hunger is not as simple as giving them the grain that would normally go to livestock. It's always been one argument. The solution, particularly in developing countries, I feel requires a multidimensional approach to sustainability, establishing on many levels simultaneously, with organic, plant-based food systems at the nucleus. The model for success at reducing hunger in developing countries, then, I believe, should look like this. These people need the tools to create sustainability for themselves, long-term and through many layers. Up to 80% of the population in most developing countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are rural subsistence farmers living in poverty and illiteracy. So these are the layers of sustainability that can be achieved for them, all centered around a purely plant-based, soil rebuilding, climate change resilient system. Therefore, no livestock. Well, to be sure, world hunger has many layers of complexity. One of the larger reasons is tied to poverty, but another significant factor is the looming shadow of our current demand to eat livestock and fish, which is indirectly tied to poverty. In fact, eating these animals ultimately affects food prices, food availability, certainly policy making, and even suppresses education to improve agricultural systems in developing countries. This has been a very frustrating topic for me. I've been involved in a number of world hunger projects. We're losing other species on Earth at an unprecedented rate. Plants, animals, insects. The current view of most scientists is more related to the rate of extinction rather than the exact number. They just can't keep up. That we're losing anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times the background rate, that which we've seen for the previous several thousands of years, which used to be 2 to 4 species going extinct per year. Regardless of the metric, it's now a massive and embarrassing amount. So why all the extinctions? And then what are we doing about it? Nearly all concerned researchers agree that the primary cause of rapid biodiversity loss we're witnessing on our planet today is by pastured or grazing livestock on land, loss of habitat, invasive species, and by unsustainable fishing practices in our ocean. There are only 300 Mediterranean monk seals left. What we're doing to other forms of life on Earth is unparalleled in the history of our planet, where one species is causing the mass extinction of nearly all other species, primarily, again, because of food choice. It reminds me of this somewhat well-known and very appropriate comment that if all insects on Earth disappeared, within 50 years, all life on Earth would end. However, if all human beings disappeared from Earth, within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish. And we clearly need to change. The subject of food choice and depletion of our own health, or sustainability of our own health, is a tremendously large topic. It's been made more medically credible by the work of many tireless researchers such as Neil Barnard and T. Colin Campbell and many others. So I call this segment, Why Do We Do It? Why do we do it? Because every highly respected health organization in the world today has a position statement regarding all the health benefits of a purely plant-based diet. We as a society just don't want to make that change. And sometimes they bury these position statements, so they're hard to find. The best way for me to summarize all this is to relate to you that of the 4 leading causes of death and disease in the US today, animal products, animal fat, and animal protein are implicated in all 4. Coronary heart disease, cancer, cerebral vascular disease, and diabetes. And Alzheimer's as well, if you go to 5. This is not just someone's opinion. This is one of the many position statements. This is one from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, formerly the American Dietetic Association, the largest one of its type in the world. And this list could also include kidney and gallstones, osteoporosis, appendicitis, diverticulosis, kidney disease, again, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, bad grade on your next final exam. Who knows? Could be related somehow. It needs to be clearly understood, though, that the link today between eating animal products and many different diseases is as strongly supported by scientific literature and case studies as a link is between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. And speaking of cancer, the 5 most common cancers, lung, colon, breast, pancreatic, and prostate, again, consuming animal products has been linked as a significant risk factor in all 5 and many more. And I need to emphasize this is about animal products, animal fat, animal protein, which doesn't change if it's grass-fed or humane raised. On the other hand, eating only whole plant-based foods, especially organic, whole plant-based foods will take you in the other direction. And it'll protect you from getting these diseases. In fact, these are just some of the many protective, disease-preventive substances and benefits that can be only found in plants. Plants contain hundreds of wonderful substances called phytonutrients that help them survive from sunlight, chemicals, and stress, insects. When you consume plant-based foods, these phytonutrients will essentially protect you in similar ways that they protect plants. And there are many, many types. Now, who in the audience is going to ask me the one question that I always get asked at every lecture, every workshop, every day? Oh, so, well, I'm going to have some help for you. Let's everyone stand up because I know you all want to ask me this. So everybody stand up, just quickly. Stand up. Okay, ready? Okay. All right, so you ready to ask me this question? So we get it all out of the way at once. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Where do you get your protein? Oh, sit down. That's good. Okay. We got that out of our system? Great. Okay. All right. Another question could be, how can I possibly be strong enough or have enough energy if I eat only plant-based foods, right? I don't know. Maybe we should ask this guy. Hey, you feeling strong today? Huh? Eating all those plants? Or maybe we should ask these guys. Hey, how are your energy levels as you migrate another 500 miles today to a watering hole? Oh, I see. Yeah, these are just animals, right? But technically we are too. And I guess you need an example from the human species, right? So, okay, let's see what I can find here. Let's try this person. Here he is setting a new world record in Toronto last year. No problem with protein. No problem with protein. In terms of insurance risk, the largest managed healthcare organization in the world, actually the US, nearly the world, with over 9 million patients, now publishes and distributes documents telling their 15,000 physicians to prescribe a whole plant-based food diet to all their patients, bar none. It's a profound statement. Just came out this year. This global depletion of your own health is really an issue of what you decide to put in your body, what you decide to eat, of course. That's where health, human health, begins, by eating the right foods. Not by continuing to eat contaminants, such as those found in highly processed foods or animal products. And then you're left scrambling around to try to find medicines and ways to cure your sicknesses or to cover them up, right? Just don't eat those things to begin with. On a personal note, I mean, you're never going to see me on The Biggest Loser anytime soon. I haven't lost 300 pounds in the last 2 days. Sorry. But I haven't missed one day's work in over 40 years from being sick or having the flu. Not one. And I've never taken any medications, no over-the-counter drugs. I prescribed quite a few, but I've never taken any. Nothing in 40 years. And I'm nothing special at all. Not at all. It's because of what I eat. And I want everyone to take a really good look at me. I'm 145 years old. Yeah, not quite. You know, this is all really important, but it really won't matter how healthy you are if our planet is not healthy. So we begin solving this with a massive and swift education campaign, I think. And we begin to reverse the trend of tiptoeing around this subject by the media and other authors and educators and many of the new food movements where we get most of our information from. I mentioned earlier that buying local has little to do with sustainability other than from an economic standpoint. It's a solid idea to help nearby farmers, and that's important. But in fact, transportation is only responsible for 4%, just 4% of all the fossil fuels used and all the greenhouse gases emitted in the entire food production process. So it's much more relevant to view this by using a complete life cycle analysis. This year, 2014, has been designated the Year of the Family Farmer, which is a good thing. But we must remember it's a type of food farm that matters most, not the size or the miles traveled. So by all means, support your local farmers markets and cooperatives, but it has to be plant-based. And then there's our Farm Bill. I mean, what a tremendous opportunity this was, and still is, for our country to solve a number of problems we have, ranging from our fiscal cliff to our climate change cliff to our healthcare crisis cliff. In many ways, they're all the same cliff. It's been frankly difficult for me to watch our policymakers over the last few years spend so much time and our money trying to construct policies based on improper definitions of the phrase healthy food. Many of the major changes that were proposed for this bill were aimed at taking away economic support for factory farms and giving more support to small family farmers, thinking that by itself will produce healthier food. It won't. Essentially, it's going to be shifting funds from large meat and dairy operations to small meat and dairy operations, and that's not going to work. So I have another solution dealing with accountability, which would get us on track much quicker, and it's what I call the eco and health risk tax. You're all familiar with the nutrition fact label, I hope. This happens to be ground beef or ground cow. It could be grass-fed, humane, doesn't matter. Something the average consumer would purchase. And on this label, you can see that half the calories are from fat. Most of those are from saturated fat, even a gram of trans fat, and quite a bit of cholesterol. Now that's not so good. But you don't see not so good anywhere on the label, do you? I don't. And also it's quite a bit of protein. But it's of the type of protein that's implicated in a number of disease states. And you also don't see what resources it took to produce what's inside that package. Well, consumers need to know this. Certainly Villanova students need to know this. So we introduced the eco and health risk factors. And in the event that these numbers are a little too complicated, we simply do this. We put a little notation on the label. It could say not so good, and it could say not a good choice. Or in the future, when all this becomes voice activated, a little Siri voice could pop out and slap your hand and say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. That's not a good Siri voice, but it's a good start, but it's most important to reflect these factors in the cost. This is not a carbon tax, and it's certainly not a soda tax, which would vastly understate the problem, and therefore it wouldn't work. It's an eco and health risk tax, something we've never done before because the true cost to our environment and to our own health has always been externalized. It's never been directly paid for, with our heads always turned in the other direction. So I think we need some form of a top-down approach to impose on those producers and consumers who generate the most inefficient, resource-depleting food items, which is not Pepsi, it's not Coca-Cola. This scenario of accountability will, of course, be inevitable as we begin to run out of resources. So I ask, why wait till then? Globally, we spend $500 billion each year subsidizing the meat, dairy, and fishing industries. This money could be spent helping to transition farms to fully plant-based systems that are more resource efficient, eventually economically viable, and certainly more conscientious. Well, this is one of the questions of our future. It's a topic that's gaining momentum, and I find it's a natural path for people wanting so badly to hang on to the false sense of needing versus simply wanting to eat animal products. It's a path of least resistance. So let's look at a couple different ways to answer this question. And there you have it. That's certainly one way to answer it. I mean, he thinks so, and so do many others. My thought, though, is that we need to be fully aware of the consequences of our food choices, not partially aware. And we need to understand what we're doing to all areas of global depletion. And we need to know the magnitude and the urgency of the problem. This is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem. So let's take a look at another way to answer this question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. And to do this, I think it's time that we go to the very essence of the problem. If we gave everybody in the room 1 acre of land to grow any food you choose, what would you grow? What should you grow? Well, at all my other college and university lectures, the students know what they want to grow. I don't know what that is. But I tell them, sure, it's a good idea, I suppose. We're trying to talk about food here. But on this 1 acre, you could try to raise 1 grass-fed cow, thinking it's fully sustainable, just like that New York Times multiple-time best-selling author is telling everyone. But in most areas of the world, especially the areas that I visited and researched, 1 acre is not enough. You're going to need 5, 10, even 20 acres for that 1 cow. So if you use your 1 acre for grass-fed livestock, then you'd end up with 50 to 400 pounds of a type of food that's, again, then implicated or indicted in a number of disease states. And along the way, you produce 4 to 5 tons of methane and carbon dioxide, and you've used 1 to 2 million gallons of water for that 1 cow. Not just for rehydrating or hydrating, but it's tied up in grass and pasture or crops. Or instead, if you used your 1 acre of land to grow something like kale, quinoa, potatoes, beets, all that wonderful food we had tonight, and fruit combination, you produce 20 to 50,000 pounds of food that's infinitely healthier for you to eat and for our planet to grow. It's literally astounding what you can produce on that 1 acre over the period of time, a couple years, it would take to raise your grass-fed cow. It's quite an amazing difference, isn't it? Now, imagine extrapolating that model out, or variations thereof, in terms of global use of our resources, and now answer that question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. That's what I'm asking here, before I was cordially escorted off the farm. No, I wasn't. And for those who still think that eating any animal is sustainable on any level, then it's time to introduce this concept: relative or optimal sustainability. That'll work. How sustainable is it to raise and eat any animal product in a relative sense as compared to plant-based foods? How can we best use our resources? What foods will have the very least effect on climate change? Which foods best promote our own human health, and which are the most compassionate? This is the way we need to start viewing things, in a relative sense. So, isn't this a beautiful countryside scene? I mean, beautiful skies, blue skies, green grass, rolling hills. This happens to be in the northeast section of Victoria, Australia, where I was researching the ecological effects of their food choices. And instead of seeing beautiful blue skies and rolling hills and things like that, I like taking a closer look. So here's what I see in this photo. I see this: depletion of land, air, food, water, inefficient use of resources. And I also see something else, which is the main reason I visited this specific area to research. We're going to lock in this view for just a moment. We're going to advance. We're all going to go down the road just a few hundred yards, and this is what we see. This 1,000-year-old forest is what that cattle ranch used to be, and it was a home to numerous insects, plants, and animals. There are 3 different types of eucalyptus trees growing here, and one animal in particular that I was looking for, which is now endangered due to destroying its home. It's this little guy. All of his family members were killed. Thousands are each year. He now lives in a small, remote rescue area in that forest, and he represents species everywhere on our planet that are being devastated by cattle or other livestock operations on land, fishing in our oceans, lack of awareness about food choice, and politics. In fact, koalas are predicted to become extinct in just 20 years by those few kind caretakers who are close to the situation. It's quite sad, and that's what I see in this view, whether it's in Australia or anywhere else in the world. And now, about the Go Meatless on Monday campaign. Okay, if you do this, assuming you're eating meat on most of the other days of the week, if you go meatless on Mondays, you're contributing to climate change, pollution, global depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health on only 6 days of the week then, instead of 7. You'll be creating a false justification for your actions on those other 6 days of the week. In other words, I don't think we should rest on the laurels of what you're doing right 1/7 of the time. And what does eating less meat really mean? Well, just in the 1 hour I'm speaking here tonight, from say 6 to 7 o'clock, over 8 million animals were slaughtered for us to eat in that 1 hour. 114,000 tons of grain were fed to livestock that we're raising. But during that same hour, 354 children in the world have died from starvation. 6,000 acres of tropical rainforest were destroyed and replaced by cattle or crops to feed them, and over 4 million tons of greenhouse gases have been dumped into our atmosphere by livestock. Therefore, I'm advocating a different approach than what the United Nations and others suggest when they state that we should eat less meat. Because with that approach of eating less meat, well, only 7 million animals will be slaughtered in the next hour, and only 113,000 tons of grain will be wasted, leaving only 353 children in the world that'll starve to death in the next 1 hour. Isn't that what less means? So unlike Mark Bittman and Michael Pollan and all other eat less meat advocates and food gurus, I think these numbers should be 0. I sure do. And it's rather easily attainable. There's no magic involved. Nothing has to be invented. No new technologies have to be employed. It's simply with what we choose to eat. And now we're going to take a quick look at the food service section of the policy of sustainability for the entire University of California system, just because I just left there. And why? Well, because this is a perfect example of how the efforts of well-intentioned individuals and institutions can be so very far out of alignment with reality because of the definitions they're using. So you tell me, is this policy sustainable? What about the items I just highlighted in orange? Are those sustainable? How about their primary objective of 20% by the year 2020? Is that sustainable? Or are these merely baby steps that happen to affect 500,000 students and faculty and staff? And it's not much better with campuses on the east side of the country. I picked a couple other ones out here. This was taken right off the Dining Services website at Harvard School of Public Health. So even at these prestigious universities, West Coast, East Coast, many in the Midwest I visited, they certainly would benefit and then understand and adopt a more accurate view of sustainability and then translate it to their students, our next generation of leaders, and to do it now. And one more important definition that needs refinement, ethics. The ethical consideration of what we choose to eat. The topic of conscious eating has always been about animal rights and animal welfare, hasn't it? The life and death of other living beings that we consume, how they're treated. Ethics has always been about this, but I think it's time to view conscious eating or ethics in a much different and a much larger context. Is it ethical, for instance, for any of us to eat food that causes the extinction of other species if we don't need to? Is it ethical for the vast majority of humans on Earth to cause or contribute heavily to irreversible climate change, loss of ecosystems, and resource depletion, while 2% are living their lives by way of food choice to protect Earth? Is it ethical for any of us to use our planet in a way that exacerbates world hunger and extracts the potential for future generations to survive? Is it even ethical for 313 million Americans to impose their diet-related healthcare costs on the 5 million who choose to eat the right foods? So you see, it's time we rethink ethics. It needs to be framed much differently than just with animal rights. In fact, one of the chapters in my most recent book is titled, "Why Should I Pay for What Everyone Else Decides to Eat?" It's something to think about. It makes little sense then to continue doing what our predecessors did in the late 1800s and early 1900s when we didn't know any better. And there are far less mouths to feed, more land and water to do so. Do any of you still use a typewriter or a feather quill pen to write messages with? Huh? You think the internet's slow. How about the Pony Express or the Stagecoach to send those messages or to travel? Well, your great-grandparents did. And what about candles or kerosene lamps to read with at night? Anybody out there still using kerosene lamps? Well, why not? Why don't you use these things? Well, I'll tell you why, because these things are obsolete. That's why. We've outgrown them. They're inefficient. They don't fit. And so it is with all meat, dairy, and fish. The world on a global basis can no longer support the production of these things. Just like the typewriter, just like the Stagecoach, we need to evolve past them, and we need to do it today because the clock is ticking. Almost everything we do, every decision we make every day is based on our culture, what we've learned, what someone else has told us to be acceptable or necessary. After realizing that bloodletting here wasn't so healthy for us after all, we miraculously stopped, even though we've been doing it for more than 3,000 years. There are culturally driven practices we are accepting today, especially with food choices involving all animal products, that are much more unhealthy for our planet and for us than bloodletting. And by all accounts, we don't have 3,000 years to get it right. Well, many organizations are quite concerned about how we're going to feed the growing human population, expected to reach 9.6 billion by the year 2050, because demand for food, including meat and dairy, will nearly double what it is today. And looking at the future, we'll likely see increased numbers of the wealth of the middle class and an associated increase in demand for these animal products. We're going to see more and more people to feed with less and less resources to do so, and increasing climate change will make matters worse. This is one of the proposed solutions to all those problems, and you know what? They're right. Livestock does hold great importance. The less we raise, the more secure food will be, of course. Well, this was interesting news when we heard about it from National Public Radio over a year ago, that Americans are eating less meat. And the results of this NPR poll were snatched up and broadcast on websites everywhere that they thought we were finally making some progress. But as usual, the whole story really wasn't told. Although we ate 1.5 pounds less beef last year per capita, our country still produced, meaning we raised, slaughtered, and packaged over 2 billion pounds of beef 1 year. And even if the U.S. is eating less beef in 2013, the consumption and production of all other animal products in our country went up. The U.S. now consumes more turkey per person than any other country in the world, and our yogurt consumption is up 400% since 1982. Globally, there's been a 50% increase in consumption of animals and animal products just in the last 15 years. Beef production and raising cattle is expected to increase 5% annually over the next 6 years, and poultry production is expected to double. The demand to raise, slaughter, and eat animals is really hardly believable. Last year, the one-year figures look like this. So where exactly does the phrase eating less meat mean here? I mean, maybe a pound or two less of pork. And if we really try to make a change in someone's diet, I mean, really try to take away something that might be unhealthy, I mean, look what happens. You know, it's slightly true, but we're not doomed. We're not doomed yet. At this stage, one would have to ask, what are all the conservation groups doing about this problem? You know, the ones we give our money to. Are they telling their 40 million members to stop eating animal products? Certainly these groups must know about the global depletion food choice connection, and they're doing something about it, right? You know, the answer is no. No, they're not. All these groups are concerned about climate change, as many are. But none of them have made a statement about the profound effect eating animals has on our environment, despite the fact that it does, and despite the fact that we've entrusted these groups to preserve and protect our planet. Where's all of our donated money going? Well, there's a superb documentary about this problem that was released this summer called Cowspiracy that I encourage you to see. Aside from those conservation groups who are obviously in the dark, there are a few researchers, a few organizations that are quite concerned and they're quite aware of the dire predicament that we're in and the very short timelines we're faced with. Any of these organizations will bluntly tell you that our species is in a state of unsustainability and we can't remain on this course for very much longer. But not one of them is connecting that final dot. They continue telling us that our survival is in peril and we need to change. But change what? And they make it very clear that we need to stop over-consuming and over-producing, but over-consuming and over-producing what? Again, fossil fuels and waste are very easy targets for them to point their fingers at. Why aren't we getting the truth from those with platforms, those who are guiding us? Well, it's because of three reasons. First, many are comfortably unaware, like many of those conservation groups. And those that are partially aware, such as those researchers, simply can't get themselves around to making the right statement because they themselves consume animals. I mean, after all, how can we expect one of our leaders to guide us toward health and restoration of our planet if they can't even do it for themselves? And lastly, many of our leaders are afraid. That's right, they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their audience, and they're very afraid of the powerful meat, dairy, and fishing industries. Well, regarding sustainability, please picture 2 points in time and space. Point A is where we currently are as a global community. Point B is where we need to go, the point of true sustainability. Now, we're very far away from point B, and there's a vast sea of challenges between the two. Most businesses, individuals, and organizations in the world are getting on board a large, powerful ship at point A, trying to get to sustainability. But their navigators don't know how to get there. Their compasses and GPS systems are broken, which is very dangerous because all those on this large ship think they're going to make it to point B, but they won't. They're floating further and further away from it in a zone that I call pseudo-sustainability. Worse, there's a narrowing timeline before point B is going to be too far away and they'll never make it. Now, a few of us sitting on the dock at point A can clearly see point B, and we know how to get to it rather easily. We could just hop in the water and swim there. But here's the kicker, we can't get there by ourselves. Getting to point B, the point of true sustainability, is a collective effort. We need to move the critical mass, taking all those on that other large ship with us. We need to travel together and quickly enough, or none of us are going to make it. That's the way sustainability is for humanity. Therefore, our leaders, those steering that large, powerful ship with most of the world on it, our leaders need a new navigation system. The choices we make together, particularly with things we consume, such as food, dictate supply and therefore directs the use of our resources. It's not the industrial meat producer or the dairy factory farmer that's going to take down the last standing rainforest on Earth. And it won't be the large commercial fishing trawler that's responsible for catching that last poor single fish remaining in the sea. It's going to be the human who's demanding it. Well, some argue that it's unrealistic to ask the global population to eliminate meat, dairy, and fish. Not only as a functional change, but behavior psychologists would suggest that we don't use words such as eliminate or stop or don't when advocating change in food choice or any type of change, because that's too negative. It creates barriers such as feeling of infringement of individual rights. So instead, many suggest to use the approach of kindly asking everyone to please begin replacing, or could you kindly substitute animal products with plant-based alternatives, because you can't tell anyone that, or you shouldn't tell anyone that they might have something taken away to stop an unhealthy habit, even though it's adversely affecting them and everything and everyone around them, but don't infringe on their individual rights. Really, is that so? Well, just where would you use the words please replace, or could you kindly substitute here? Sometimes it doesn't fit. There's a way to blend the two, to blend this with a loving, kind approach, showing somebody possibly a new direction. Knowing everything I've talked about today, there's certainly ample reason for feeling quite discouraged, isn't there? Anyone feeling discouraged out there? Yeah, well, I understand. Regarding the loss of our planet's life systems and what we've done to our planet, there's so much bad news around us, and even with increased awareness, it seems like we'll be constantly fighting an uphill battle. But in the midst of potential despair, there can be found great news. There's an easy solution to global depletion. We don't have to destroy our planet or ourselves to eat. In fact, it's the other way around. We can thrive, we can flourish, but we must change, and it is a choice. We need to eliminate, or, kindly substitute, or please replace the practice of raising and slaughtering, harvesting, and consuming animals. And we need to do it now if we want to save lives, including our own. Now, there's great news in all this, because the food choices that are optimal for our planet's health happen to be the very same food choices that optimize our own health. So you know what? We need to look at this a different way. I mean, we could all be heroes. That's right. All of us. I mean, we could even be superheroes. Swooping down and saving lives and saving our planet with every single thing we eat every single day. Yeah, superhero. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling quite a bit better already. Well, something quite telling happened at the end of the annual Global Climate Change Conference that we talked about earlier. In our closing remarks, the executive secretary of the conference, Christiana Figueres, provided a summary of the conclusions of 200 nations, NGOs, and researchers by stating this about our future, about greenhouse gas emissions and about climate change. She said this: "The science is unquestionable. Therefore, despite the obvious effects on the industry itself, we must call for the elimination of the use of coal as an energy source. And," she said, "we must do this immediately." Notice that she didn't say that we should use less coal, or for us to use only local or humane coal. Pretty sure I didn't hear her say that. I also didn't hear her say we should all go coal-less on Mondays. In fact, she said we should eliminate coal, even though coal carries with it slightly higher amounts of greenhouse gas emissions than raising livestock does, and coal has no real direct effect on water scarcity, world hunger, loss of biodiversity, and all other areas of global depletion. But raising and eating animals does. So the door has been opened, hasn't it? Perhaps inadvertently by Ms. Figueres and 200 nations, but as far as I'm concerned, the global stage for massive food choice change has been set. If there's an imminent threat to our planet and to us, which there is, well, we should certainly be able to call for its elimination, and we should be calling for it to be done immediately. You know, as a global community, we'd have no difficulty joining arms to avert a looming nuclear war, I don't think. It would become our number one priority, without question. But the cause of our demise may never be a nuclear disaster. It very well may be something as simple as food choice, and the fact that it was never placed as our number one priority. Well, my view of Villanova, in closing, is this. You have everything in place as a leading institution for sustainability, except for food choice. It's not yet properly positioned. So you want to keep increasing your awareness levels and match your efforts to the overall importance of food choice as a leading factor in achieving sustainable systems, and it has to be translated through all of your education. So you're already committed and you have a terrific sustainability policy in place. So simply enter food choice. And with efforts regarding water, AquaHealth is a good start. It's a very good start. But you must account for the massive amounts of fresh water used in animal agriculture and the realities of the virtual water footprint found on your plates. Or what's the point? And then place it deeply into your sustainability practices and documents. And a quick word about preciseness of definitions used here on campus. Before you order that omelet or scrambled eggs from cage-free hens, It's one of the largest movements that I find on any college campus anywhere in the world. Understand exactly what cage-free means. Has anybody visited a cage-free operation? Okay. Okay, well, I visited a number of them. Well, understand exactly what cage-free means. In most cases, it does not mean that these eggs come from happy, healthy hens. Those are the hens that we've rescued on our sanctuary back home. In most cases, it will not mean exactly what the American Humane Certified will tell you. And it's not anybody's fault other than theirs, and you just need to bring yourself up to speed. I'll tell you what cage-free really means very quickly. Cage-free means that instead of 67 square inches of space, each hen now has 128 square inches, which seems fine, doesn't it? Almost twice as much. But that's no larger than the size of your laptop computer screen. That's all the room these hens get to stretch their 30-inch wingspan on average, a 10 by 12-inch space. Still with their beaks cut off, still with 300 million male chickens thrown into grinders because they're unsuitable for the industry. And the vast majority of these cage-free hens are still without sunlight. They often have more injuries, documented injuries, than those that are caged. This is cage-free. It's typically a congested mess. And from an operation not too far from here, in Virginia, at the end of their 52-week instead of 12-year lifespan, this is cage-free. It's very sad to see this, but it's the truth. And we could go on with a closer look at all of their meat, dairy, and fish products served on any campus, anywhere in the world. It could get pretty graphic, and I'm not really here to do that. And as this wonderful sign says, from your dining services, you are the key to making this work. So let's get behind your dining services. They're a great group. And ask your sustainability committee and administration to support these dining services in their efforts and attempts to purchase and serve only those foods that optimize our resources and at the same time are the healthiest for you to consume, and at the very same time they're the most compassionate. So by definition, those can only be plant-based foods, whole plant-based foods. So with properly positioning food choice alongside your other efforts regarding energy and waste, Villanova will not only be a leader, but be the model by which all other institutions will pattern themselves. That's my view of your wonderful university. You know, some things have certainly changed since November 13th, 354 AD, but not the core values of truth, unity, and love, which resonate through a call for true sustainability. So I encourage and challenge everyone here to become more aware about your food choices, seek more accurate definitions, and understand the timelines that we're faced with. And then let's all commit to making a difference, but not just with our own health or our own life. Let's all commit to making a difference in someone else's life and commit to making a difference in the long-term health of our planet. But let's do it now, not later. We might not have a later. And let's think about making a difference every single day of the week, not just on Mondays. Be a superhero for those around you, guiding them and the ship they're on to point B before it's too late, and continue saving lives every single day. That, my friends, is what sustainability and positive change to achieve it, I think, is all about. So with that in mind, let's all of us here today in this room, let's all of us go out and inspire others to become aware. Thank you so very much. It's certainly been a privilege for me to be here. Thank you.